In the American Old West, there was a crime many frontier communities considered worse than murder: horse theft. A man could survive losing money, he could survive losing cattle, but losing his horse could leave him stranded hundreds of miles from help, exposed to hunger, thirst, outlaws, hostile weather, or worse. On the frontier, a horse wasn't a luxury. It was survival itself. That is why horse thieves inspired a level of hatred few other criminals ever faced. Across the West, men suspected of stealing horses were sometimes dragged from jails before trial. Vigilance committees formed to hunt them down. Ranchers organized posses that crossed entire territories in pursuit of stolen stock. Yet despite the risks, some outlaws made fortunes stealing horses. They built criminal networks that stretched across multiple states. They outsmarted sheriffs. They humiliated cattle associations. And for years, they remained untouchable. One became known as the king of the horse thieves. Another operated so successfully that ranchers across the Great Plains cursed his name. And a third helped run one of Wyoming's most notorious theft rings. These were the men who turned horse stealing into a frontier empire. Doc Middleton, the king of the horse thieves. By the early 1880s, there were few names more frustrating to lawmen across the Great Plains than Doc Middleton. Born James M. Riley, Middleton did not earn his infamous title through a single theft or one spectacular crime. He earned it through volume. Year after year, horses vanished. Ranchers would wake to discover entire bands of valuable animals gone without a trace. The trail often led back to the same man, Doc Middleton. What made him so dangerous was not his speed with a revolver. It was his organization. Middleton understood something many lawmen did not. The frontier was enormous. A stolen horse could be driven across territorial lines, mixed into another herd, sold under false ownership, and effectively disappear forever. Tracking one stolen animal was difficult. Tracking dozens was nearly impossible. Authorities launched repeated efforts to capture him. Sheriffs pursued him. Detectives investigated him. Newspapers followed his every move. Yet Middleton seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to avoid permanent consequences. Every arrest appeared to lead only to another escape, another legal complication, or another return to business. His reputation grew with every passing year. Eventually, newspapers began referring to him as the king of the horse thieves. The title stuck, so did the fear. Throughout ranching country, his name became synonymous with missing horses and failed investigations. For a time, it seemed as though nobody could stop him. Dutch Henry Borne, the scourge of the plains. If Doc Middleton represented organized horse theft, Dutch Henry Borne represented scale. Lots of scale. Operating throughout the cattle country of the Great Plains, Dutch Henry built a reputation as one of the most prolific rustlers of his generation. His targets were not limited to horses. Cattle disappeared as well. Entire operations seemed designed to exploit the weaknesses of frontier ranching. The open range created opportunities unlike anything seen today. Millions of acres remained unfenced. Livestock often roamed vast distances. Ownership could be difficult to prove. For an experienced rustler, the temptation was obvious. Dutch Henry took advantage of every weakness he could find. Soon his name began appearing in conversations from Wyoming to Nebraska and beyond. Ranchers blamed him for missing stock. Lawmen searched for him. Associations offered rewards. Still, the thefts continued. Part of his success came from geography. The Great Plains offered endless escape routes. A rustler who understood the terrain could disappear into hundreds of miles of open country before authorities even knew a crime had occurred. But another factor contributed to his reputation: boldness. Many thieves operated quietly. Dutch Henry often seemed unconcerned by the growing attention surrounding his activities. As his notoriety increased, so did his legend. Some frontier residents viewed him as a clever outlaw. Most saw him as a threat to every honest rancher trying to make a living. Whatever the opinion, one fact remained beyond dispute. Dutch Henry became one of the most notorious rustlers the frontier ever produced. Jack Bliss, Wyoming's master thief. While Middleton dominated headlines and Dutch Henry haunted the open plains, Jack Bliss built something equally dangerous: a network. And networks are much harder to destroy than individuals. Operating in Wyoming, Bliss became one of the leading figures behind an extensive horse theft operation that plagued ranchers throughout the region. Horse stealing on this scale required more than courage. It required planning. Stolen animals needed routes. They needed buyers. They needed safe locations where they could be hidden, moved, and eventually sold. Bliss understood the system, and he used it exceptionally well. As ranchers struggled to protect their livestock, reports of missing horses continued to surface. The losses added up quickly. A stolen horse represented far more than property. For many ranchers, it represented months of income, sometimes more. Frustration spread throughout Wyoming cattle country. Pressure mounted on local authorities. Pauses formed. Investigations expanded. Yet bringing down organized theft networks proved difficult. The frontier remained vast. Communication remained slow, and experienced thieves knew exactly how to exploit those weaknesses. For years, Jack Bliss remained one of the most feared names among Wyoming stockmen. Not because he robbed banks, not because he shot lawmen, but because he understood how to quietly steal wealth from under a rancher's nose and vanish before anyone could stop him. The Old West produced no shortage of famous criminals: train robbers, outlaws, gunfighters, murderers. Yet few inspired the same level of outrage as horse thieves. For years, they operated across the West, frustrating lawmen, infuriating ranchers, and building reputations that outlived them by generations. Today, the horses are gone, the trails have faded, and the frontier itself has vanished. But the stories of the West's most notorious horse thieves still remain. A reminder that in the Old West, stealing a horse could make a man rich, if it didn't get him hanged first.